today's environment, people are involved in stressful circumstances and situations. And I agree with what you said about change. I think one of the things that brings us the most stress is change. And one of the things that we know and spend a lot of our time talking to people about is the importance of accepting change as a reality, and also accepting change as a way in which we can really learn the lessons that we've come to life to experience.
Yes, and we have to accept that we are here to learn. And if we can remember that, we can accept change easily. But because we know that if we know that we're here to learn lessons, then we look to see what the lessons are, and see. It's just like when we're ill, and we all face illness, and we think, is there an inner need, something here I need to work on, something I need to work through? And not that I think it's always an illness is always caused by something like that, but if we do look at life objectively, at our own lives objectively, then we can get through things more easily.
And as we experience change in our lives, so many times we feel inadequate to meet those changes, don't we?
Almost always.
And we also feel that that maybe we're not going to be able to get through a circumstance or situation. And so often when we look at the resilience or the ability to deal with change, which sometimes breaks us, we really need to find ways in which we can cope with those changes. And one of the beginning points of coping with any change is, as you said, accepting where we are. And one of the important things that we teach so often at our church center, and we teach in the ministry and also with people with whom we counsel, is the importance of understanding that no matter what is happening in our lives, we can and will be guided and directed in ways that we can deal with the circumstance and situation. But we have to begin by accepting where we are. And that's a difficult thing, because where we are at any given time may not be where we want to be. As you said so well earlier when you spoke about sickness, people don't want to be sick. No one chooses, or very few people choose to be sick. And yet, many times in our lives, we find ourselves in the midst of sickness. In other times, we find ourselves in the midst of broken or ending relationships. And in other times, we find our work situation changes. And so we begin really by accepting where we are. And one of the things that I spend a lot of time telling people is that there's a real difference between giving up and giving in. And so we're talking about giving into the situation, and that is surrendering to the situation, but not giving up. And because we give up, we kind of fold our hands and droop down and whine about the way it is. But in fact, what we need to do is surrender or give up or give in to the situation and acknowledge that that's where we are, and that from the point where we find ourselves, we can then be guided and directed in what we should do.
And what I hear you saying is it's only when we let go and let God that we're really able to step aside and view our problem objectively. And I think those are very important points, don't you? Because if we do let go and let God, then we have stepped aside. And if we don't view our problem objectively, we're not going to gain the knowledge that we're seeking for future reference, or to go on at this time.
And we do need to go on.
Yes, we have to.
So often people stay in the midst of their broken state, or their painful state, or their hurt state, or their defeated state, or their sad state, and just stay there. And you've heard me so often tell about the lady who came to us for counseling, and she had gone through a horrible divorce, a bad relationship, and she was just so injured from this divorce and just couldn't get over it and couldn't get over it. And after several weeks of counseling, she finally made some comment to me that made me think that possibly this relationship or this divorce wasn't as fresh as I thought it was. And I said to her, "When were you divorced?" And she said, "Well, in 1968. And so she was talking to me, and she had come to me as though this was a fresh problem in her life. And it was fresh because she'd kept it so. But she had stayed in the situation, hadn't she?
Yes, and that's so unfortunate. And you know, it shows our lack of faith, and we don't have to be a part of a church necessarily to have faith. It's our own spirit of connectedness with Creator God. And when we have that, then we are able to bear problems more fully, aren't we? We're more able to go on with our lives because we realize that God and I are one, which we say in our church so often, and we are indeed a part of Creator God, and also we're a part of all of humanity. We're all there's that interconnectedness, and when we're being objective, we can realize that, and then we don't put so much emphasis on our own personal problems. That little things don't mean that much to us. So it's being objective and looking at others collectively instead of looking at ourselves singly, isn't it?
And it's absolutely true that we're not talking about any kind of religious belief or faith tradition. And really, even though we come from a faith center and a religious center, metaphysical philosophy, New Thought, Christian teaching, it doesn't matter what our viewers' belief system is, what church they belong to, or what church they don't belong to, whether they have faith or don't have faith. The ability to deal with problems and deal with a brokenness of person is possible for all of us. And there is a universal process, and that process begins with our connectiveness to God and God's connectiveness to us, which has never been broken. And I think that's difficult for many people to accept and understand because their tradition may have taught them that they are some way separated from God because of something that happened either through original sin or through some process of life. But in fact, we believe that we are all always connected with God and that God's feeling for us is always the same and that God wishes us good and only good.
Yes. And last Sunday you asked in your sermon about God is love. And that was very good because God is love. And if we think of it that way, then that also makes life's problems more bearable, doesn't it?
It does. And that concept of the constancy of God is very important, or the constancy of that which is divine.
Yes.
If words sometimes create problems for people, but the constancy and as we said earlier, that connectiveness that we all have with God and that we all have with each other. And that begins to eliminate the problem that we feel so often in our isolation. And certainly when we're broken and when we're depressed and when we're hurt and when we're defeated, we seem to begin to isolate and to pull away when in fact we need to open up.
That's
And
right.
we need to open up to our environment, to the circumstance and situation, to the change, to whatever is going on in our life. And we need to open up to the presence of the divine and open up to our connectiveness with others. Then we become stronger.
Yes. And we can all observe, those in our audience, and we can observe that the people who heal, and we all know people, unfortunately, who are ill, that those who heal are those who are exactly the way you just described, aren't they?
Absolutely. They're not isolated. And if we look at people who are struggling with life-threatening illnesses, cancer is an example, and we know and have worked with many people, many cancer patients who are connected to either family or friends, or if they have no family or friends, to the circle of those who are caring for them.
That's right.
And they become such strong overcomers in the process. And it doesn't even have to do with whether or not they have a healing. It has to do with how they are able to cope with what's going on. And you can take the brokenness of even cancer and have a very radiant life. And you know, and I know, we've both experienced people who have been absolutely radiant to the very end.
Exactly. I've seen that happen so much, and isn't it an inspiration? And those people who remain radiant realize that they are, they have a connectedness with Creator God. They have that spiritual aspect inflow into their lives.
Right. And that connectiveness that we have to God is so tremendously important in healing the brokenness of our spirit. And we'd like to pause at this point in the program and share with you how you may obtain some information about what we're speaking about. So in order to deal with our brokenness of spirit, we need to build upon our connectiveness with the divine, our connectiveness with each other, and to open ourselves to be guided and directed in ways in which we can heal the brokenness, be guided in our actions and our thoughts, and improve our quality of life. Before the break, we were talking about how people with their illnesses can cure or restore their broken spirit. And really, they do that by reaching out, don't they?
Yes, they do. And the first thing I think is that we have to acknowledge to ourselves, not to anyone else, that yes, we are facing a crisis in our lives and identify the problem, because I know that's how it's worked best for me and the people I counsel, that it works best, because so often we're in denial because we don't want things to be wrong in our lives, but things go wrong. So if we don't acknowledge to ourselves that yes, this is a problem, it's just like addicts, whatever they're addicted to, stay in denial for years sometimes, and sometimes they never get out of that denial. But in order to stop an undesired habit, then they have to acknowledge it. And they always have to in order to stop it. So we can use that as a guide and just go in our day to day living when we're feeling depressed or when we're feeling negativity in any way, to acknowledge it to ourselves and then consciously see what we need to do.
Right, and that denial is really a problem that we all have, isn't it, from time to
Indeed,
time?
indeed.
And certainly people with problems and addictions and difficulties and people who are broken have
Mhm.
that aspect of denial. And a great deal of denial comes from the fact that things aren't the way we want them to be. Isn't that true? And the way that we want things to be is not necessarily the way things always are. A good example that I can think of is in talking with people about their problems. Those who are raising children are never, or rarely, I shouldn't say
Mhm.
never, are rarely pleased with the way their children are behaving. And yet, children behave, young people, young adults, teens, behave in the way that they are behaving. And I think parents need to understand that. And it's the same with a circumstance such as illness or the end of a job. We need to understand that that's the way it is, even if that's not the way we think it ought to be. And
Exactly.
when we begin to think about how we think it ought to be, we're stepping out, we're really moving into denial.
Mhm.
And we're trying to create something that isn't really real. Isn't that true?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. And I'm from a large family, as you know, and when I could look at all my siblings and see that we were all so very different. So that was a lesson for me early on. We don't all react to circumstances in the same way. And some people would laugh at adversity and others would cry and some would feel apprehensive and all different things. So we have to know ourselves and know what it is that makes us feel good or makes us feel bad, makes us feel overly fearful or makes us feel reassured. And when we know ourselves, to know ourselves is above all. And that's an adage that's been important in our lives for centuries and forever. To know thyself and thou knowest all. If we know ourselves and truly are honest with ourselves, then we know where we're going and what we're going to do, and we can decide means to get us to the desired place. And it doesn't always necessarily the same thing every time.
Mhm. So, to restate the ways in which we can restore our broken spirit, we need to acknowledge where we are
Yes.
as a beginning point. We need to accept the fact of where we are, give in, surrender to where we are. We need to reach out to others. Maybe we need to talk to someone. Maybe we need to share. Maybe we
Mm-hmm.
need some professional counseling.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to connect. And in order to connect, we need to connect with not only those around us, is tremendously important, with someone around us, a human connection, but we also need to connect with that which is divine.
Yes.
And in the time that we have left, since we really are spiritual people,
Yes.
and even though we deal with the mental aspects, the psychological aspects, and also that we want to get deeply into the spiritual reality. And so I'd like to spend the last few minutes that we have talking about how, as we connect with spirit, with the
Mhm.
presence of God, with the divine, we can begin to heal our broken
Mhm.
spirits.
Well, first of all, we have to accept that Creator God is a supreme being, and there is that one, but we are a part of that one. And I think if we accept that first of all, there is a divine source, and then that we are a part of it, then it makes us feel like we can do anything. We can accomplish whatever we have to accomplish because we're not alone, and it's not our own. It's not something we have to do alone. Another thing, we've talked about the time of change. We're living in this great time of great change. Well, the angelic beings have become more prominent and prevalent in our lives as years have passed. So now it's quite an ordinary thing for people to see angels and talk with their angels. So they can, the person who's despondent can look to their own guardian angel for as a source of inspiration, for guidance, and for assistance. Because whatsoever you shall ask in prayer, believing, ye shall receive. If we ask for inner help, we will get that inner help, whether it's from our guardian angel or other angels or those on the inner planes who work with us and work to help us. But it's always there. And if we can remember that and use it, then we're far ahead of the game. Isn't that right?
That's absolutely right. And the important issue, and certainly a part of our metaphysical philosophy, is that the responsibility is ours.
Right.
And one of the things that we teach and talk about is that God doesn't do anything, and that upsets a lot of people. But God doesn't do, we do. God is. God is constant, and God's completed the task that was created for us, and all of the abilities, all of the knowledge, all of the intuition, all of the intellect, all of the spiritual awareness is there for us. All of the great good and health and happiness and joy and prosperity and all of those things are accessible to us, but we have to do it. And we do it by connecting with the presence and power of God. We often talk about infinite intelligence, and when we attach our mind to the mind of God, when we attach our mind to the mind of the angelic beings, when we attach our mind to those who are on the inner planes of life and on the other side of life, we begin to open a channel that is magnificent. And that's the connectiveness that we talk about. We talked about human connectiveness, but connectiveness to the divine opens up a whole new vista of life and knowledge and awareness for us that can bring healing and strength and restoration and peace and all of the things that we need in order to restore us.
Yes, and we have to believe in ourselves and know that we are a part of divinity and that we are capable of creating whatever we wish to create. And as long as we live with that knowledge and truly believe it, it's going to happen. Because whatever we believe is going to happen. If we believe negativity is going to occur in our lives, it's going to occur. And Job is a supreme example there. But if we believe in a positive way, then it's going to happen in a positive way. So we are our own creator source here on earth. And as we go through life, we create whatever we want to create. And we have to take that responsibility because we can't put the blame off on God when bad things happen. Because what one person considers bad, another person might consider to be normal. So when things happen that we don't like, we have to take responsibility for that.
We have to take responsibility for every aspect of our life, including how we feel and how we react and how we respond. And so, as we restore our brokenness, and we all have those periods of time, we have to connect with something that's going to guide us and direct us, but then the action is up to us. We can't simply leave it up to God and expect that God's going to do everything for us. That's not at all what we talk about. That's not at all what we teach. In today's environment, there's so many people who talk about secular humanism as though that's some awful thing. And we believe in spiritual humanism, which is only a step from secular humanism. Humanism simply talks about the strength of the human person, the human being, working for the betterment of human life. But a spiritual humanist is a person who understands the reality that God has given humanity all of the resources that it needs. It isn't God pulling strings like a puppeteer, although that's somehow the way that some traditional people view religion and spirituality. Instead, we are very much a part of the human family, and the human family has been empowered by God, by the infinite intelligence, by that which is divine, and imbued with the same creative force and power that power has. We are created in the likeness and image of God, and so we have the ability to create either the heaven or the hell that we experience. And if we're in a hellish state of consciousness, and if we're in a difficult and painful time, then it is a time of our creation, not a time of God's creation.
Yeah. And we have to always remember that God gave us, mankind, free will, and the angelics don't have that free will. They stay attuned to God. We've been taught from so many sources, I'm sure that must be true, that the angels stay attuned to God. And we have free will, and it's a big responsibility because we create exactly what you've been saying through our own free will. So if anyone is despondent, if anyone is having trouble getting out of problems in life, just if we can just realize that we have the power from the inner, from those on the inner to help us. We don't work alone, we work with those. And then we just have to reach out to other human beings too. So many people don't reach out, and they're really giving someone a gift when they reach out to that person and allow them to help them. And I don't mean putting our problems on other people's backs and not shouldering our own, but just asking for help, asking for listening, just to be able to listen to someone is a gift. And it's a gift to both, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. And this reaching out is tremendously important. We need to reach out to others, and others need to take hold of us.
That's right. And we see that all the time. We see people who heal as those who are accepting. And I have a friend who's a very private person, and she never would reach out to anyone. She developed cancer, and you know what? She reached out to everyone, asking for their prayers, listening to what people suggested. And she didn't necessarily follow everyone's advice, but she followed a lot of it. And she is a much happier person, and she's healing.
And there's an example of an individual who had a broken spirit, no question about it. And by reaching out and connecting with others and connecting with that which is divine, because I know that person reached out to many people
Yes.
of even not her own traditions
Exactly.
to embrace a kind of spiritual revitalization, and really just opened herself to all of the possibilities. And a whole new kind of a situation brought itself into her life, and the brokenness became victorious and overcoming, didn't it?
Yes, and that is exciting, isn't it? Now, there was a person who reached out to other people all the time, but she didn't allow others to reach out to her. But when she developed cancer in her body, then she did reach out. And she allowed others the privilege and the joy of reaching out to her and helping her. And that was healing for her. And it was healing for the people reaching out. So life is, we don't live in airtight compartments. What we do affects everyone.
And by healing and restoring our broken spirits, we heal and restore others, don't we?
Exactly, because it's never ending. It doesn't stop with just within the family structure, within the community structure. It affects everyone because we're all interconnected.
And that wonder of that is that restorative power is available to all of us all of the time.
Yes.
And we can either be recipients of it or we can be givers of it.
Yes.
And as we give and receive, that inflow and outflow of power and strength comes into our lives.
Exactly. And we can just use common sense and sensitivity and reaching out to others and reach out to them according to what they need and desire, not what we think they need. But we can be available to them and really offer and let them know that we really want to do this for you. But if you feel it's not necessary, that's fine. We accept that.
And isn't it important to be a sensitive listener?
Yes.
And to really be an active listener? And we
Yes.
could do a whole program on that, and we probably should.
Yes.
But to actively listen, and if we actively listen to people around us, we'll get a sense of their need.
Exactly. Exactly.
And as we get a sense of their need, we can reach out, and we can sometimes find that as they're just beginning to reach, we can hold their hand, but we really need to be patient and just listen.
Yes. And then when we do that, we feel more fulfilled, we feel more at ease, and that our life is worthwhile. So it all works together for the good. It doesn't just help that one person who needs help. Because we're all interconnected, we're all receive the help and the inspiration.
And as we receive that help and that inspiration, our obligation really is to share it with others.
Exactly.
And as we share it with others, some of us are going to be less broken than others, and some of us are going to be more resilient than others. But isn't it exciting to teach people how to become overcomers and to bring about this manifestation in their own lives, but also so they can share it with other people?
It is indeed, because then we create joy in the world, and wherever we can help make people more joyous. And people can be joyous when they're facing terrible diseases, because it's all within their own minds. If they think, woe is me, then that's what they think. And if they think positively, then they're thinking joyously. And if they think gratefully, then they're thinking joyously. And the more joy there is in the world, the more joy there is in an individual, the lighter the atmosphere.
And I think on that note is a good point for us to stop as we talk about the lightness of being as a way in which we can heal our broken spirits. And I don't know what problem you face, but I know that we all face a situation and circumstance of broken spirits from time to time. And we hope that the information we've shared with you will be helpful. We look forward to seeing you next time.
This program is a community outreach of Christ Church. Dr. Mike Costello speaks each Sunday morning at 11 a.m., and Dr. Iris Freelander speaks on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. at the church. On Sunday evenings at 6 p.m., there is a meditation and healing service. Come and join us. You will be warmly welcomed.